Okay.
It's a game system.
So,
You know what Nintendo is?
What?
your voices are going to be on the video, you know. You're talking about stuff not so shaykh to the, yeah. Anyway, so,
This one time in band camp.
this one time in band camp. This one time in Torah camp. You remember what happened this summer? Oh, I remember what happened this summer. So, welcome back, guys. This is the, up until now we've learned Klali HaMishnah, the two parts of Mishnah. You were there on the first day, so you remember me. I talked about this Mishnah is divided into two parts. Gemara is divided into 21 parts. Now, I'll just say them over and kind of give you a brief explanation, but we're going to examine each of these individually with like one or more classes focusing on each one. So if you're like you don't get it now of these, don't worry because you're going to get it very well by the end of the shiur. We will have gone through examples in various different parts of Shas and to like really show you how these concepts work inside. But this is back in Mavli Talmud. Shmuel and Nagid are mechaber from Mavli Talmud. He says the first, he said the Torah Shabbal Peh is divided into two parts. He said Mishnah and Pirush Mishnah. The second part, Pirush Mishnah, is also, we know it as the Gemara. Chelak HaBeis of Mishnah, Chalokim Shel Pirush HaMishnah. That the second is Pirush HaMishnah. We call it the Gemara. Yichalek, it is divided into 21 portions. Now, the 21 portions of Gemara are essentially puzzle pieces. You're not going to see them in the same order all the time, but once you come to recognize them inside, you also have it in front of you, my friend. Yeah, you do have it right in front of you.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, right there. So,
It's tinier than that.
So, you're welcome to look in this one if you want, if it feels like it's easier. Anyway, so these 21 parts are basically puzzle pieces. They're not puzzle pieces in the way that they fit together in a puzzle always in the same way. They're going to interact with each other in the same way as you see them when you see them inside, but you're not necessarily going to find them in the same order in every Gemara that you come across. And they're grouped. I'll say them in kind of the manner in the way that they're grouped. So the first one, the Elohim, these are them: Tosefta, Beraisa, and Pirush. These first three, Tosefta, Beraisa, and Pirush, are the Tosefta and Beraisa are Tanaic teachings. They come from the same people, the same rabbis who taught the Mishnah, and not from the rabbis who taught the Gemara. And Pirush is essentially going to be, it goes with them because usually it's going to be a question asked in the Mishnah that will result in one of these two being brought. The second group is Shaila and Shuva. A Shaila is just what it sounds like. It's a question, and Shuva is the answer to the question. We're going to go over each of these in depth as we approach them in the proper time. In each class we'll be focusing basically on one. Kushya, Piruk, and Tufta is the next one. Kushya is basically it means literally a difficulty. A kushya is unique in that the person who's posing a kushya agrees with you. In other words, imagine two friends talking. Let's say Yosef and I are talking. Yosef says a nice shita there. He says a nice svara, a nice idea, and said to you, Yosef, I agree with you. Your svara looks really good, but I know of this Mishnah over here. I want you to explain. It seems like it contradicts you. I want you to explain how your svara, will work with this Mishnah. There are two ways to do that. Either you explain how your svara is not contradicting. These two ways are called a piruk. And these other ways to explain that your svara is not contradicting, or to find another person another Tana, another Mishnah, another Beraisa that you can hang your hat on, and say, I disagree with this one, but I agree with this one because I disagree with this other opinion, but I agree with this opinion, which they may be arguing on each other and the like. That's what a kushya is. Unlike a shaila, whatever. Shiur, Rami, Tosefta, Hatzrucha, and Maisa these are kind of in a group. You'll find these in a group because these are now we're dealing almost exclusively with svara. It's entirely reasoning. It's not anymore bringing from. It's not anymore bringing from previous sages from the Mishnah from the Beraisa that Ramya is shiur and Ramya are still Beraisas. Shiur and Ramya. Shiur is Yosef says a nice svara. And yeah, you're full of svaras, and I can find a beraisa that supports your svara. Ramya is you said a beraisa, I gave you the beraisa that supports your svara, and David says, wait a second, you're supporting his svara with that beraisa? I have a Mishnah that contradicts that beraisa, and so David says, David, right? You're gonna say, but your beraisa is contradicted by this Mishnah.
So that's what means for Rami?
Rami means to throw two things against each other. So, lamashal, if you throw, when we say Ramya, we're throwing two things against each other. It's going to be either a beraisa that's being thrown against a Mishnah, or a Mishnah that's thrown against a beraisa.
Like a cheeseburger and a Sprite bottle, right?
No, more like two bullets flying at 600 miles per hour, and whichever one's made of stronger metal, whichever one is going to be made out of stronger metal is not going to get it. The other one's going to be blown to smithereens. That's more what it's like. A Ramya is one of them is not going to hold up. But what happens when there's a Ramya? Then there's an option of a Hutzrucha. A Hutzrucha is a possible workaround a Ramya to say, yeah, maybe this is needed and this is needed. This beraisa is needed to teach us this thing, and this Mishnah is to teach us this thing. That's what the Tosefta. Tosefta is when in Amora, Yosef says a nice svara, yeah? You say a svara, you're full of svaras today. And I say to you, Yosef, that svara doesn't make any sense. And I'll tell you why it doesn't make sense. That's a Tosefta.
It's an attack.
It's an attack. It's a logical attack. I don't think your svara makes sense, and here's my reasoning behind it. This is, like I said, I'm just doing a quick run through. This is not, if you don't understand it now, don't worry at all, because we're going to be going over each individual one in depth. Maisa, when it comes time for the psak halacha, right? You want the psak halacha? When you come to the psak halacha, you want to have it down in halacha l'maisa. So Maisa is when an Amora goes out and actually puts their psak halacha into action, and it says, Rav Yosef, Avid Avdun, he did an action. That's a Maisa. Maisa is as soon as it's down into action, then it is a stronger bearing in halacha, as you see that in the you'll see it inside. I'm doing it a little out of order here because some of them are so what happens after a maisa? So as soon as there's a maisa, then it's time for the halacha. Because the halacha is basically going to be your the halacha is going to be when the Gemara paskins. Hilchasa Kerebi. Hilchasa Kerebi Yosef. Hilchasa Kerebi Yeshua. Hilchasa Kerebi Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha. So far, all of the other ones I've used actual names of Amoraim, even though your guys' names happen to correspond. Those are actual names of Amoraim. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha. Yeah. Anyway, and Shmaita is an Amoraic teaching. Sugya is the descriptive term for what a section of Gemara is. We'll talk a little bit more about that in context when we get there. Teku is when there's a question and it's unanswered. No, and it basically means when Eliyahu Hanavi comes, he's going to come and stand up his beis din and answer these questions. Haggadah is what it sounds like. Haggadah is unrelated to the actual halacha and comes to tell a story in Madrash, a story of explaining what's happening in Chumash, or in Yaakov is Haggadah. Yes, but
Haggadah or Haggadah?
Haggadah, same thing. Okay. The name of the klal is Haggadah, but occasionally you're going to see it inside. It depends on Aramaic, Hebrew, whatever. Hara is a teaching in halacha. Shita is a teaching is not going to go according to, and Shinui is a way of pushing off. You'll see it as Ha Mani Rebbe Ploni. Someone's pushing off a beraisa or pushing off a in order that to keep themselves out of this machlekes. So we're going to go over each of those in depth as we get there, and bear with me. And I'll try to be a little more prepared and get you guys copies, photocopies, and everything. I was a little discombobulated this Friday, so we'll jump into the very first one, which is Tosefta. So Tosefta is very interesting. It's kind of exactly what it sounds like. You have the Mishnah, and then you have the Tosefta. What does it mean, Haisif? Yosef li ben Achar. What does it mean, Haisif? Add. To add. It's the shiur HaMishnah, the addition of what was left over. Rabbi Rabbeinu Kadosh came, and he picked out there were 600 Sidrei Mishnah. We have 6. They call it Shas. Sheshes Sidrei Mishnah. We have 6 Seders of Mishnah. There were 600 at the time. Imagine 100 times as many Mishnayos as we have now.
Wow.
So, basically, what happened is that the Rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, took those 600 and collapsed them into 6. He left a lot of things out. He was very concise with his language so that so you could assume, you could make an inference from what he said and learn out all the other things. But there were a lot of other teachings that were more clear, that were around at the time, that were more clear, that were Lamashal. We're about to learn an example of one that was where the Mishnah was very unclear in the Tosefta, and we're going to learn the same Mishnah that we've been working on all this time. But the Tosefta will say more about what the actual Mishnah means, because the Tosefta is what, when Rebbe put together the Mishnah, he left out the Tosefta. That doesn't mean shiur HaMishnah. It's what's left over. Once the Mishnah was put together, what was left over was called the Tosefta. And the Siman is Tana. So you look inside the Gemara, and you see Tana like this. 99% of the time, it's going to refer to a Tosefta. When you see it, sometimes it'll refer to a person who teaches Toseftas or Baraisas, but most of the time, you're going to see when it says Tana Rebbe Ploni. What Tana with a Tuf Nun Aleph inside the Gemara, it's always going to be a Tosefta. What's the difference? What's the nafkamina of Tosefta Baraisa? What should it be? Tosefta and Baraisa. We'll go over Baraisa a little bit more in depth next week. But what's the difference? Tosefta, as soon as the Mishnah was done with, the Tosefta was put together and brought back in, because there were people that couldn't get out of the Mishnah, all the things that needed to be understood from the Mishnah, and so immediately afterwards they assembled the Sefer Tosefta. The Baraisas, which are similar to Toseftas, I'm not going to go all the way through it because we're going to do it next week. The Baraisas were learned still Baal Peh, they were still Torah Shabbal Peh, for the next 150, 200 years after the Mishnah was settled, was put together. And so Baraisas are not going to be as accurate or reliable as Toseftas. A Tosefta is strong enough that it'll argue on a Mishnah, and the Gemara can paskin like a Tosefta against the Mishnah. A Baraisa almost never is. The Gemara does not usually. There are times when the Gemara will knock off a Baraisa before paskin. They'll say this Baraisa is a mistake. Don't bring it into the base Medrash. So that's the difference kind of between Baraisa and Tosefta, but we're gonna be focusing on Tosefta today. When it comes Ba'akvei Mishnah, when it comes at the ankles of the Mishnah, literally is what that translates to, in the ankles of a Mishnah, that is when it comes right after a Mishnah, the Gemara will paskin like the Tosefta against the Mishnah. That's a klal. There are going to be very, very, very isolated cases where it's not the case, but it's once again, it's a klal. 99% of the time, you'll see that if a Tosefta taka comes right in the heels of a Mishnah, the Gemara is going to paskin like the Tosefta. And later on, not this week.
Usually in between.
What's usually in between? Sometimes a pirush is coming in between a Mishnah and a Tosefta, and sometimes that that is still defined as Ba'akvei Mishnah. If it's now coming, later on in the sugya, and there's been some Amonite discussion, and then it's being brought, then it's not going to be the same. But if it's coming taka Tana so and so right after the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to paskin like it. The reason why it's that way is because when Rav Ashi and Ravina, the Masudra Gemara, put together the Gemara, they put it together in a way that when the Tosefta would come right after a Mishnah, that's a signal, I guess, that we're going to be paskening like it. That's basically a lot of this is to teach us the signals to understand what Rav Ashi and Ravina intended to tell us in the way that they put together the Gemara. And so when you see a Tosefta right after a Mishnah, then it's going to be the Gemara will paskin like this Tosefta. So let's look at it at an example, and first let's actually go into the first traditional thing that we've done again and again and again, and just go over it one more time, and pretend like we haven't gone over it again, because now we're going to learn it in a little bit of a different way, not to take certain things for granted, and we're going to, then we're going to understand it through a Tosefta. So, as we've gone through this Mishnah many times, this is the first Mishnah in Shas. From when do we say the Shema in the evening? Now, from the beginning of the time. When is the beginning of the time of Zman Kriyas Shema at night? From when the Kohanim go into eat their Tzurma. What time is that? When do you see it? Where do you see it? In the
3 stars.
Where do you see it in here? It says with Zman that says hey, that could be right after they go to the mikveh. Could be right after the. We'll not take anything for granted this time. Could be right after they go to the mikveh. Could be right after it could be at sunset. If you say, Bo Hashemesh. There's 2 opinions that the Gemara brings, like immediately down at the end of this Amud, that maybe it's when the sun sets, maybe it's at nightfall, as you said, but the Gemara doesn't take it so simply. It's a question because it doesn't say clearly Tseis HaKochavim. Yeah. So the Tosefta comes to clear that up a little bit. Let's just jump into there. So this is from Sefer Tosefta. I can usually see it this way, but because usually you're going to see them inside the Gemara, but I decided to kind of to take it out and separate it so we could look at it. This is a Tosefta. It looks kind of like the Mishnah. It has a lot of things in common. Some of the lashon, some of the language of the Mishnah is very similar with the Tosefta, because the Tosefta is really just adding on to what the Mishnah has to say and explaining it a little bit more. So this is the Tosefta, first Tosefta in Masechta Brachos. When is the beginning of the time to recite the Shema in the evening? Misha'ah shebnei adam nichnasin lechol pitan ba'arav shemasos. From the time that people go, the normal, your average people go in to eat their bread on Erev Shabbos. Divrei Rebbe Meir, the Chachamim Omrim, and the Chachamim say Misha'ah shekohanim zechayin la'echa b'terumasa. From the time that the Chachamim are meriting, they're able to they acquire the ability to eat their teruma. Simin ladavar. There it is. Tzeisa kochavim. So basically, what is the Mishnah trying to tell us by saying Misha'ah shekohanim nichnasim lechel b'termasam? It's coming to teach us two chedushim. Can anyone point them out to me? The first that the Tosefta is clearly saying, but the Mishnah is hinting to in the way that the Mishnah says.
What exactly are you asking?
I'm asking, the Mishnah teaches us two chidushim with that opening statement. Me'masai korena shema ba'arvin. When do the Kohanim? I can go back to it, and you can see. Again, we'll take a look.
Nechnasin le'chol ba'arvin.
It's
right?
Yeah.
Ba'arvin.
So when Mishash, hold on. Okay. So look at this again. When do we say the Shema in the evening? Now this, from here onwards, is teaching a two chedushim. From here until here, this is coming to teach us two things. And the Gemara is going to explain them. Those two things from this one statement, we can't see clearly in the Mishnah. You and I, and when I look at it, I definitely don't see this in the Mishnah. You don't see it in the Mishnah.
I do. What do you mean I don't? Of course I do.
I don't see it in the Mishnah.
I see everything.
You see everything.
I'm like Abba. Abba said, I see everything. I'm like Abba. What do you mean? What do you mean? You're disrespecting me.
I don't see it in the Mishnah either. I don't see it in the Mishnah either. So,
of course I don't see it. If you don't see it, I see it. Come on.
I don't see it either. But here's what it's teaching us. It's teaching us two things. The first thing that the Mishnah is teaching us is that the time that Kohanim go in to eat their Kohanim go in to eat their teruma is Tzeisa Koch. That's the first thing that the Mishnah is teaching us. The second thing the Mishnah is teaching us is that that's also the time for the beginning of Kriyas Shema. I couldn't see it inside, so I'm teaching you how to kind of see it inside. This is what a Tosefta is for. Those two things are taught clearly in this Tosefta. You can see it clearly. It teaches the Shemesh Rebbe Ramir's opinion. So here it taught us and that the Shah, that the Kohanim come to eat their teruma, is the same as that. And then it taught us Siman L'davar, when is the time? Tzeisa Kochavim. A Tosefta is going to be a little bit more explanatory inside than a Mishnah itself. Rebbe tried to be as shortest in the number of words as he possibly could. And as you'll see, we'll see in many places, and we're going to learn the story of Ilfa maybe next week. It's a piece of Agarata that talks about a student of Chave, Rabbi Yechanan, who hung himself from the side of a boat and said, if you can tell me a beraisa that I can't find for you in a Mishnah, then I'll drop and I'll drown. But regardless, people were supposed to be able to see all of this in the Mishnah. Immediately after people stopped being able to see all of it, They wrote down the Toseftas. So let's see a little bit inside of how the Tosefta actually clears things up.
When were the Toseftas scribed?
That would be the answer to the question. And so the Toseftas were scribed at the time, the generation immediately after, even the same generation. Rabbi was still alive. Rabbeinu HaKadosh was still alive at the time. Who were the Masudrei of the Toseftas? Reb Nassan.
How do you know all these things?
How do I know all these things? Well, you can look in. Some of this information you can find in the Rambam's Hakdama to the Mishnah Torah, and the Rambam's Hakdama also of to Mishnayos Shas. You can also find it in Kitzur Seder Adeiros. Some of this information. Some of this
learn like that? You learn like that?
What do you mean I learn like that?
If you look on the side of its head, it's got an imprint of the Gemara. He sleeps on it. Look at the side of his head. Yeah, but I think it says Bates or something. I don't know.
That's very funny.
Sorry.
So, yeah, this is going to say Amar Mar, the master said, yeah? The Mishnah said from the time that the Kohanim entered in to eat their truma. Yeah? Michte, let's examine this. When you say Michte, it's like the Gemara is identifying there's a little bit of a problem, we need to look into this. Kohanim, truma. When can they go and eat the truma? Gemara answers, Mishas Tseisa Kochavim. It should be Tseisa Kochavim is when the Kohanim can go in. And the Gemara asks, Litzne Mishas Tseisa Kochavim. Why didn't it say? Why didn't the Mishnah just say Mishas Tseisa Kochavim? Why did I have to say Mishas Kohanim Nichnas and Le'echel B'Truma? The Gemara actually says exactly what I told you when I was showing you the Tosefta. It says Milsa Agav Arichi, one of the extra words for it, Kamash Milan. This comes to teach us Kohanim Eimesai Ka'achel B'Truma Mishas Tseisa Kochavim. That this Mishnah is coming to teach us not just when the time is for Kohanim to say Kriya Shema, but also the time that Kohanim come in to eat their teruma. Any questions so far? Yeah? Okay. I mean, don't feel ashamed to ask at all. You see how the Mishnah is teaching us two things in that statement? By saying that the Kohanim come in to eat.
Right, those three words.
It's also coming to say that this is also the time. We assume that we know.
Trumosa was the semen for the
semen,
the 3 stars.
Yeah.
Said, yeah,
Precisely. Right. And so that's what it says. Semen l'davar tzeiza kochavim. So it continues. Yeah. Then we have a little machlekes here, which I'm not going to get into because this is already a different one of the klalim that we'll get into.
So because the Mishnah is precise, it says something that implies two.
Yes, the Mishnah is so concise that we can make inferences from the Mishnah and drashas from the Mishnah the same way we make drashas from Mikra, almost. The entire Gemara is sitting there trying to figure out what each word of a Mishnah means. There are Mishnahs that have so few words and incredible amount of Gemara on it because we're trying to decide what on earth were the Tanaim saying and what was Rebbe trying to teach us with this Mishnah. Here's inside a little bit on we are going to look again at the sugya. We are going to look again at the sugya once we get more into the klalim. There's a couple of ones that we're going to be looking more into both in brachos and in other masechtas as we get more into it. So here we have a machlekes up at the top. Talks about, based on the wording of a pasuk, I'm just going to sum it up because it's just, once again, it's other Klalim that we'll get into. This is kind of the first class. It's hard to do it because you can't go into too many of the other Klalim, so we're just kind of being makatzer on that stuff. Essentially you have a machlokes on the wording of a pasuk. According to one opinion, it could mean that the Kohanim can go in and eat it at sunset. According to the other opinion, they have to wait until 3 stars come out. Now, the Gemara wants to clear this up, yeah? So how does it clear it up? Hagar pashtalame beraisa. It comes to bring a beraisa, which in this case is a Tosefta. We get Tanya beraisa, simin ladavar, seisa kochavim. So the Gemara has this machlokes here. Rav Shila, let's actually learn it from here. Okay. We'll learn it from here because this is another way of learning it. It's kind of like an ikadamni here. B'marva in the west in Eretz Yisrael. Ha de Rabba bar Rav Shila lo shmielu. They didn't hear this. Rabba bar Rav Shila did a nice little drasha and they didn't hear it. When it says the sun went, the sun came, it says in pasuk. Boy Hashemesh, Be'ez Shimsho, who? Is it the setting of the sun? Omai Tahar Yema. And Tahar in the pasuk means, which means, purified, but here it means Tahar Yema, means the day was purified. The day was completed. The day was gone completely. Oidima, or perhaps Bias Eider, who that the Bias Shemesh means the morning. So in other words, it isn't the Kohen can't eat teruma until the next day. My tahar gavra. And what does it mean, tahar, in pasuk? Means that the person has to be tahar, which means it's after the following day. After they tovel, they have to wait all night, and they can't do it until the following day. V'hader, and the Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael, pashtalam beraisa. They figured out this answer from a Tosefta. She even says beraisa. It's a Tosefta here. Oftentimes you'll see. It's only bringing a tiny piece of the Tosefta, but it's the Tosefta that we looked at just a moment ago. And it says, Simen Ladavar Tzeisa Kochavim. So we used the last little bit of this Tosefta, as the Gemara will sometimes cut them up and bring little pieces of them at a time.
And sometimes the Gemara calls Baraisa Tosefta?
Sometimes the Gemara will call a Tosefta Baraisa. The Gemara will never call a Baraisa Tosefta.
It's not strong enough.
Because Baraisa literally means outside. So if you say Baraisa is outside, it's outside of the Mishnah, then in Hinami also a Tosefta is also a Baraisa. But categorically they're different in that a Tosefta, while it is outside of the Mishnah, it is as strong as the Mishnah. The Baraisas are not, the Baraisas themselves, which we'll talk about more, the Baraisa is not just there's lots of different types of Baraisa. There's Baraisa and Medrash. There's Sifri, there's Medrash Rabbah is a lot of it is Baraisa. There's tons and tons of Baraisa all around in different categories of in Nigla, in Pnimia Satira, which Agada is Pnimia Satira. You'll also see Baraisas over there that are also that also have the chance of being brought in the Gemara. But the Toseftas are stronger than most of those. So here what it did is it says, Shema Mina, Bias Shimsho, that it refers to the setting. The Uvay Hashemesh refers to the setting of the sun. Umay tahir, and what does tahir mean in the pasuk? Tahir yema. Any questions? Yeah.
What is this teaching us? I don't understand.
So, the point is that sometimes the Gemara will bring a piece of a Tosefta in order to solve a machlokes. The whole point of Beraisis and Toseftas is that they're teachings of Tanaim, and they're used usually to resolve machlokes. To like where the Amoraim are wondering what's the answer to this question, just kind of like if you and I were arguing about something, and which is the minhag, which is the din.
I understand, but this is a Tosefta.
Yeah, from here to here is the segment from the Tosefta that we looked at earlier.
And they're bringing this to tell us.
To tell us that the time that Kohanim, the two opinions here. The two possibilities here is one that the Kohanim can't eat their truma until the morning, and the other one is the Kohanim can eat their truma at nightfall. The way that they resolved this is by bringing this Tosefta here that said Simin Ladavar Tzeisakoch. Now later on, we're going to look at this sugya again later on, actually starting from here and going downwards. Because there's a big machlokes of a bunch of different raisas here, but
and the Shemamina part is just two different ways of putting the same thing. That's
Shema Mina is a conclusion. So you'll always find this is, I guess, it's another klal, but I'll tell you now because it's important anytime. When you see Shema Mina, it's making a conclusion. Say Shema Mina, it's we learn out from this, we understand from this. Shema means to hear, but it means to understand. So Shema Mina, we learn from this, we understand from this. B'yas Shimsho is that Uvoy Hashemish in the pasuk when it says the sun came, it's referring to the sun setting, and when it says V'taher, it says. It means Tahir Yema, when the sun sets and the day is gone, and that's we'll explain. It's explained in a little nice drasha up here, but we'll go into that more once we've learned the proper klalim to get there. It's like I said, it's kind of difficult to like take out a segment and be like this is the one, but just to demonstrate a little bit of a use of a Tosefta here.
And this is the halakha that says kakavim?
Yes.
So why isn't there a little thing?
Because this is really just it's a to mifashit a machlokes on what not a machlokes on when not so much a machlokes on when the time of Kriyas Shema is, but when it is for Kohanim. And when the Gemara has already told you a halacha, like in this case on the previous Amud,
so it would have showed you there.